Don Jose Maria Chacon. A short presentation done by Kyle Joseph. Don Jose Maria Chacon. He's a famous governor from Trinidad and Tobago, and history remembers him particularly for what he did when he was governor of Trinidad from 1784 to 1797. When he was governor, he did a number of things that had, be it to your interpretation, positive or negative, several consequential impacts. These impacts were economic, political, social, you name it. It's a lot of things that when he was governor that was enacted under him that we see the consequences of, I would argue, even up to today. And as a result, I think it would be quite important to look at this figure in Trinidad's history and investigate and to understand him more.
The structure of this presentation will be as follows. It will examine the biography of who Chacon was, and followed by that, it will then go and examine his impact on Trinidad and Tobago, economically, politically, socially, and how this would have been either positive, negative, or both. I guess you're wondering, why Chacon? What is it about Chacon that makes him stand out? I mean, there are several other historical figures in Trinidad that we could do an examination about, so why not do it on them?
I mean, there's Sir Thomas Picton. I mean, he had a say in front of his name, so he seems like that you should be done on him. Why not do a video on him? Well, it's not because Picton was disliked by the free coloreds, the enslaved, and a couple of the British that were on the island. Now we chose not to do him, but more so because when it is you examine Picton and everything that Picton did, it can't be taken in and of itself. You have to also take into consideration the governor that was before him that laid the atmosphere and the context for which he had to be governor. And as a result, not that this nullifies the role of Picton or anything, but for the purpose of this video and to select a person that I would have liked to have done an investigation on, I thought it would have been best to do it on Chacon. But then you may raise, why not do it on Ralph Woodford? And you may say, okay, yeah, there's a square named after him, Woodford Square. But again, it's not because the free coloreds did not like him or nor the enslaved, but because, again, like Picton, when you do examine Woodford, you can't take it in and of itself. You have to take into consideration Chacon's role as governor in the years before him. And this is to attest to how significant Chacon was. So with that being said, we shall move on.
Well then, I guess you would assume that Chacon was liked by all, which would be false, because he wasn't liked by all. He was disliked by several people, and you would expect that anyone who's in power, especially in the role that he had as governor, that he would not be favorably liked by everyone for whatever policies you take. However, the reason why Chacon is to be examined and why he's so important is because Chacon laid a strong platform for all the governors that were to follow after him, in that, be it from an economic, political, or a social standpoint. And whether you see it as negative or positive, when you do examine these governors in the future, it's everything that is examined about them is done based off of the position that Chacon left Trinidad in 1797. So as a result, we will go ahead and get straight into the presentation to understand more about this person, Chacon. So what were some of the characteristics then that Chacon possessed? Because this is quite fundamental. He would go on to be the governor of Trinidad, and his characteristics that he had would, in nature, consequently impact how he governed Trinidad. So then what characteristics he had. When it is you examine Chacon and you come to understand, okay, well this is Chacon, well this is who Chacon was, you have to understand the time period of where he was in at that point in time. And he was born out of the Enlightenment period, and as we know from the Enlightenment period, it was not necessarily a rebirth of ideas as the Renaissance was, but it was a period in time when his people had new perspectives on a vast majority of different things. So as a result, and of being a component of that, Chacon's outlook on a variety of different things, and we would see how this would impact his governorship later on, was that he was now an individual who was intelligent, he was strategic, and he had foresight as it related to how Spain was to properly govern our colonies. So, with that being said, we would examine some of the qualities, such as him being multilingual, him being a strategist, and also just his intelligent nature as well. Okay, so Chacon was multilingual, and that is quite critically important when it is we are to come to examine him and some of the characteristics that he had. Why is it important? Well, he's being sent to Trinidad, and Trinidad just had the cedula of population, which was aimed at bringing French planters to Trinidad, and these planters would help benefit the Spanish crown, and that Trinidad would not be developed when it is they didn't have the resources to do so. And the benefit to the French planters is that they had new arable land that was virgin soil. So the issue is that you have this island with one, well, not one set, but a whole lot of French planters speaking French, and then in addition to that, you have the situation that in the island or colony, whichever one you prefer, also had a huge security issue, and this actually came to rise when it is Naipaul. Sorry, he talks about it in his book, The Loss of El Dorado, and he points an example when Chacon had to utilize his both his French and his English to quell a potential fight between the British and the French in the capital of the colony. Well, he was also a military person, and he actually served as a captain in the Spanish Royal Navy at Mobile during the American War of Independence. So he had a militant background, and he fundamentally understood how to go about strategizing from a military standpoint. And this again will come into consideration, or at least into the spotlight, when it is Trinidad eventually capitulates. Of course, literature tends to ignore Chacon in this in this aspect because of the capitulation. However, he still understood, and during his reign, he would have attempted to at least fortify some parts of the colony. So again, this attests to just how knowledgeable he was in this militant field and military field. And then lastly, Chacon was actually an engineer in the Spanish army. And of course, you would see this later on in his governorship, when he has a huge focus on infrastructural work and public works and stuff like that.
With that said, Chacon and Trinidad, here it begins. You understand the biography of Chacon. Well, now it's to understand how he came to govern Trinidad, and from then on, we could fully understand his role and impact in Trinidad. So Chacon was directed by the monarch in Spain to go and be a governor in Trinidad, and as a result, he would have left Spain, and he would have had to have gone to this colony that, of course, he would never have been to before in the West Indies. He would have traveled on the seas throughout the Atlantic for a couple of weeks, because it took a bit of time. When it is he would have arrived in Trinidad, and he would have arrived at Puerto de España, which is modern day Port of Spain. They come down the gangplank, and you could just imagine he would have reached here, and who knows what his immediate reaction was. But obviously you could tell that the houses, which don't form actual, like, these were the houses there, but it personifies just how broke Trinidad was.
When it is you examine Chacon, it's quite important to understand just how badly off Trinidad was prior to Chacon arriving, and this doesn't paint him as someone that was just completely heroic. However, it does help you to understand, okay, Chacon faced a huge issue as governor. And unlike the governors before, who would have attempted to find the solutions to the issues that they had, Chacon was actually able, for the most part, to find solutions, be it to your perspective, short or long-term solutions to the issues that Trinidad had. And some of the issues that Trinidad had, in order to understand that, you have to fundamentally understand Spanish colonialism.
Spanish colonialism revolved around the 3 G's: God, gold, and glory. They were hell-bent on achieving these 3 objectives. So now within the Caribbean, where they had gold, such as Cuba, Hispaniola, and Mexico, and to a greater extent Central America and South America in the further on in the later years, this would obviously receive much attention from Spain because again their philosophy at this point in time was guided by the three G's: God, gold, and glory. So as a result, these places received the spotlight. The interest of Spain, of course, with this interest would have come ships and investment and peoples. But of course, where there's spotlights, there's also areas that are often neglected. And in the dark, from Trinidad and Tobago, go all the way up to arguably Puerto Rico to a lesser extent. These areas were to a great extent neglected. And the reason why is because when the Spanish would have come to these islands and visited, they would have realized, hey, these places have no gold. Does that doesn't fit what we intend to do here? And with that being said, of course, these areas would not have received the kind of attention that it wanted. So now Trinidad was in a predicament, was in a tough position, and as a result, it faced years, decades of neglect. The Spanish crown, because Trinidad and the gold, obviously, you weren't going to give a place that you could not guarantee on your investment, which was the guiding philosophy at this point in time, that they would get gold from the island, and of course, in turn, they would invest in and people. Trinidad did not have gold, and as a result, it did not receive the large amount of sums and investment and peoples and interests that Cuba and Hispaniola and in time to come, Mexico and other islands within the Americas would receive. So how does this impact Trinidad? Well, Trinidad as a colony is pretty broke. No interest, no investment would obviously result in you not having the most favorable monetary picture as of right now. So what does this all mean? Well, Trinidad would have had no ships at all. Williams notes in a history of the people of Trinidad and Tobago that when it is a Dutch ship arrived in Trinidad, the Spanish settlers begged the ship to stay because they had no proper cutlery and they did not see a Spanish ship for well over 30 years. Just imagine that, 30 years and no ship arrived in Trinidad and Tobago. That is crazy. The island had not no investment, it had minimal investment. And if you were to compare the investment that Trinidad received as compared to Cuba and the islands further up the chain, it was minuscule. It was poor. It was tantamount to just being completely neglected. Of course, because you had no investment and no interest from people in Spain, this would not lead to a large population. It would not lead to a large agricultural base because people were interested in gold. You did not have gold. Why are we going to come? These are the questions that Trinidad could not answer. It had no other excuse or say, well, hey, we have silver. Hey, no, none of that. And as a result, the infrastructure is also not going to be developed because without money or interest from Spain or without even possessing gold, how could you get capital to develop the infrastructure that is needed in your colony? However, things were not completely bad. Williams again notes in a history of the people of Trinidad and Tobago that in the 18th century, early 18th century, cocoa was discovered on the island, and some Spanish planters, they started to cultivate it, and things were looking good. It kind of gave a hint, really, of what Trinidad could be. Of course, this died in 1733, and Trinidad was back in a tough position. Not that it was out, because even if Trinidad did, let's say, have a couple hundreds of acres of cocoa planted, how could you export the cocoa if you have no ships or interest? Again, gold was the predominant focus at this point in time. So even if it is you did have the cocoa, you as a Spanish settler would have been found waiting years and years and years, or even if it's not years, months waiting for a Spanish ship to come and take your produce back, and obviously it's not going to last that long, so it would not have been successful. To give you an idea of really how badly off Trinidad is, here's a comparison between the colony's population and other colonies before Chacon came into Trinidad, or the cedula population in 1783 when it was enacted in 1784. Antigua in 1764, and all this comes from Eric Williams' book Columbus de Castro. Antigua had in 1764 37,000 enslaved. Jamaica in 1774 105,000 Negroes were enslaved. Sadomina, I pronounced that bad, please forgive me. In 1789 had 30,000 whites, 40,000 mulattoes, 500,000 enslaved Africans in Barbados. In 1645, which was the first place, Barbados was the first place to have the sugar revolution, they had 18,300 able-bodied whites, of which 11,200 were proprietors and 5,680 Negroes, again enslaved. In 1647, one estimate runs as high as there being 82,023 enslaved on the islands. This is following the sugar revolution, of course, and all this takes place in 166 square miles. And where's Trinidad? Trinidad in 1770 has 3,340 inhabitants in the colony, which is crazy. That is utter craziness. And Chacon is going to have to deal with it. And it poses the question then, now knowing how badly off Trinidad was, what did Chacon do then when it is he arrived in this colony to address this issue?
One of the first things you could talk about Chacon is his reorganization of the administrative affairs of the colony. And this was critically important because if you have a well-run, well-organized political system, it encourages investment and it provides a stable platform for the economy to grow. So Chacon, what he did is that he established 3 commissioners of population, and these 3 were established in 3 different parts of the colony. So you would have had some that would have been located in up north Trinidad, for instance, so that would have been Las Cuevas, Tacarigua, Lavental, St. Anne's. You'd have had another commissioner who would have been stationed in and around Naparima, Galuta, Kukul, and lastly, you would have had a commissioner stationed in Guayagari, which in Trinidad and Tobago is the most southeastern portion of the country. So what did these commissions do? Well, the commissions of population, they established a census so that way they could gauge the population of the colony. They also did a number of investigations into agriculture to help establish some knowledge about the state of the economy from an agricultural point of view. Williams records that the way to ascertain the land area cleared, the area cultivated, the crops grown, and the yield of these crops, and to measure and survey each plantation. And this was critically important. Another component that the commissioners of population had to do was to investigate the state of the roads in the colony. And how they would do this, again, as William notes, is that they would do an analysis of the state of the roads, and they would ensure that labor was taken from these plantations, and plantation owners, they had to take their enslaved to help repair these roads, and they were done twice a year, these repairs of the road. And this was again fundamentally important, because if it is you have a road network that allows you to connect to different components of the colony, it allows you to open up different areas for economic investment, for economic growth, and as a result you are able to make full use of the land within your colony. The last 2 important components, or the tasks, that the commissioners of population were to do was to police the island. And this would have been very important. This created an area where planters would have felt secured with their possessions, and to ensure that justice was very much given out. And the last task that they had to do was to ensure that there was the proper treatment of slaves. This one is not to say that Chacon was concerned to the extent of abolishing slavery within the colony and throwing it away and saying this is completely wrong, but he did establish what Williams referred to as Chacon's Code Noir, which were a series of not proclamations, but rules and regulations as it relates to at least treating the slaves with some measure of humanity and dignity. So another critical component, not component, but another crucial thing that Chacon did was that he dealt with the issue of land in the colony. And what happened was that when it is the Spaniards realized, hey, the French are coming, okay, really, that's good, that's good. I can make a quick buck. So here's what's going on. I am going to claim this land that I never owned before or care to own, and when it is they do come, I'll claim it, and I will always have the opportunity to sell it to them and earn money on something that I spent no money on. Chacon recognizing how prohibitive this could have been to the French planters, and how critical it was to establish enslaved society in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, in Trinidad, sorry. He established a system where he was like, hey, okay, you claim the land, fair, okay, fine. All these lands that you claim, choose one site that you want, and the rest I'll take, and I will go about distributing this land that you supposedly claimed towards the French. And by doing this, he avoided the position where the economic growth of the colony would have been stagnated by the possession of lands by people that never possessed it before. That Chacon dealt with was security on the island, and this would have been quite important because the threat of invasion was very acute, and who likes the idea of knowing that tomorrow you won't be able to properly defend yourself, and all the investment and work that you did within the colony. So what Chacon did, and I quote from Morales Padron, Francisco, and Armando Garcia de la Torre, and they speak about the fortifications being completed in 1790 to 1791. These fortifications comprised a battery west of the capital, and another building which was located in Port of Spain, and this one was aimed to maintain communication lines. The thing about these fortifications is that they weren't, from an engineering standpoint, something to write home about, but considering that aviation was very much a common factor that they had to take into consideration each and every day, and the high amounts of sick people that existed on the island who were trying to build these forts, you consider something like this to be quite improvement under Chacon's tenure as governor. That Chacon dealt with was security on the island, and this would have been quite important because the threat of invasion was very acute, and who likes the idea of knowing that tomorrow you won't be able to properly defend yourself, and all the investment and work that you did within the colony. So what Chacon did, and I quote from Morales Padron, Francisco, and Armando Garcia de la Torre, and they speak about the fortifications being completed in 1790 to 1791. These fortifications comprised a battery west of the capital, and another building which was located in Port of Spain, and this one was aimed to maintain communication lines. The thing about these fortifications is that they weren't, from an engineering standpoint, something to write home about, but considering that aviation was very much a common factor that they had to take into consideration each and every day, and the high amounts of sick people that existed on the island who were trying to build these forts, you consider something like this to be quite improvement under Chacon's tenure as governor.
Of course, another thing that Chacon did was that where we are right now, which is in downtown Port of Spain, Chacon Street, the river used to actually run here, the St. Anne's River. And this would have been so important, don't disregard it, because the river was diverted and sent to East Shire River where it now is. And before, it used to flow here, and you can just imagine, especially if you're someone that lives in Trinidad, how bad this could have been if this project was not undertaken by Chacon. And a side note, he actually took 1/3 of his own money and decided to spend it on channeling the river to a new direction. So just imagine if the river was, as you see, this is how the East Dry River looks sometimes when it floods and how high it could get. Just imagine this river was to now run the course of where it ran before, and it would have been going down into the central business zone. Central business district, sorry. It would have been pretty bad, especially when you consider that this is where the ferry to Tobago runs, which is close to the bottom of Chacon Street. Really and truly, what Chacon did here and the foresight that he exhibited beyond just thinking about in his time really goes far to and is a testimony to how insightful he was. Of course, what Chacon did in Trinidad can't just be looked at look at it in the 21st century. What Chacon did, you could examine the effect of it in the years following both the implementation of the schedule of population and the years following his departure. So, for example, in 1797, according to Eric Williams in A History of the People of Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad's production of sugar amounted to 7,800 hogsheads from 159 sugar estates. Coffee, which from 130 coffee estates amounted to 330,000 pounds. Cotton, which should not be overlooked, is 224,000 pounds from 103 cotton estates. And cocoa, 96,000 pounds of cocoa from 60 cocoa estates. All of this really helps you to understand how impactful Chacon was, what he did, and the effect that this has had on Trinidad both then and even now in the 21st century. You could even argue and go further and say the schedule of population actually, well, it did. You could very much argue this, that in Paramin there's this strong culture that they retain from their ancestors who were French, and they have Parang incorporated up Paramin as well, and they grow a lot of crops as well, and all this could be traced right back to the French Creoles that would have come from up the islands. So after the end of this presentation, if you're still wondering, okay, well, Chacon sounds like he was okay, but I'd rather just get information or come to understand them from another source. I'm not going to question how reputable that source is. But if you're still thinking like that, I'm going to post this last image to you. So this here is a screenshot of information from Wikipedia, and of course we don't use Wikipedia, but I'm saying if you're just looking for a quick answer, don't. This is what you'll get. This is what Wikipedia says. After we did an entire 29-minute long video, as I'm recording it right now, of Chacon, this is what is said of Chacon, that essentially he was responsible for the signing the Schedule of Population in 1783. He founded the city of San Fernando in 1784 and surrendered the island of Trinidad to a British fleet under the command of Sir Ralph Abercrombie in 1797. Now that's a pretty great way to remember someone. So we have Wikipedia to thank you for that. But essentially, I hope you guys enjoy the video and it was informative, and thank you for listening.